eons. Well, we're live. There we go. As I'm saying, I haven't done this in eons. An issue on Twitter, y'all. X Twitter, y'all. Ryan, what's happening, brother?
Oh man, I've been good, brother. I've been good, man. I thought, like it's been a minute. Let's connect. But speaking of X, I feel like X is not working because like Tesla shares were down,
Well,
like they plummeted yesterday, brother.
have you ever lost like a $50 bill or $100 bill?
Yeah.
Okay. So Elon Musk lost 16 million overnight. And last week, I think he lost or 16 billion overnight or something. And like last week, it was like 30. So you know what? I mean, I don't know what it is, brother, but I'm telling you right now, I lose a 50 and I'm like, damn, man, come on, man. Imagine waking up 30 billion less overnight. That would be kind of a really tough pill to swallow, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel so. I feel honestly with like, yeah, for them it's like nothing, right? I remember that time that the whole talks of like buying X. I think we talked about this on the show a while back when he's like, screw you guys, I'm gonna buy X, and then he made it his own, and then it was just basically a loss leader, right? So,
Yeah.
interesting stuff going on, brother. But how you been, man? It's been a minute. I see you crushing it, having some amazing interviews. You just been crushing with people. I see you're still doing Dean on Wednesdays, man. How you been?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know what, Ryan? It's all about staying current, right? And um, I'll tell you, I'm seeing so many different things happening in the market and in the industry, and it's surprising, but yet not surprising, I guess, for lack of a better term. It's interesting. At sometimes it's kind of like, shoot, how's this going to go? But I'll tell you, some of the conversations I'm having lately with some pretty high executives, it's revolving, and kind of the nucleus of the conversation is revolving around salespeople that are not aggressive as they used to be. And it's an interesting piece of the puzzle because I really think now is the time as a salesperson. If we double and triple down, like we're going to get catapulted once the market turns, right? I mean, we've said this before, but in speaking to a few people, they're saying like we're getting all these resumes in, and you go through the interview process, and it's like the drive is just not there. I don't know what you're seeing, but it's starting to kind of look at me, and I'm starting to say, well, like, where's your pool coming from? What's this? I mean, this isn't just one person. This is 4 people over the last 2 days that have said the same thing. Really interesting. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I've done this in a while,
Jackson.
right? So yeah. You know what? He doesn't bark when I'm working during the day, and then there's like birds like terrifying him outside. But Dan, I love that you just said that because I'm seeing the same thing as well on my end. The people that I talk to, and I've been talking to a lot of people in actual tech sales, like SaaS stuff, and they. It's interesting to me, Dan, and I kind of want to go down this rabbit hole with you too, because
Yeah.
like from us in logistics and what I kind of know from our history was like you either have that you come in as like cradle to the grave, or you come in with sales plus ops, right? And then you look at like the whole like tech side where it's like, okay, you got a SDR, a guy or guy or girl who just books meetings for you, and then the account executive basically closes, gets on those secondary calls and
Mhm.
closes, and you got to realize like what is your drive, what do you want, and it's interesting that you said that, Dan, because you spoke with like 4 people. Like now, everybody who's watching in Canada, like the Bank of Canada, the interest rates, it was sliced yesterday. Inflation keeps going up. Loblaws got fixed. They have to pay for like the bread scam that they did, and like shrinkflation is real. So this is now the time to double down. Like, is everybody kind of in vacation mode already and been like, okay, maybe fall I'll start hitting up? Because Dan, I started like really aggressively going after logistics again, but I've kind of gone niche driven. I've kind of made my content that I kind of do. It's more pet related. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, you're going to see all my dogs, and it is for a reason. It's because I want to work with pet food logistics companies, and I already work
Mhm.
with a couple of them, Dan. But this is the time to double down. Like, I'll be honest with you, like I would say maybe out of every 10 emails I send, maybe 2 out of offices. So that's not bad, like that's an 80%, like deliverability rate. So are they sharing why they just don't have that drive, or is it people who are like bouncing from place to place? Like
Well,
what's
it's an interesting question. So my first question was, well, what do you mean? And he
mm,
said, one of them in particular was like, Dan, it's just, um, sales teams, companies that have had sales teams, they're finding they're just not prospecting at the rate they used to. They're almost like status quo. Um,
So out of
one of them
curiosity,
said,
what does that look like? Like what was, because I know Dan, for you and I, like obviously you and I are you're veterans in this thing. It was like you bang out like let's say 100 calls a day, you know, and then you've got everybody kind of talking about less is more, and like, you know, these, we use all these tools right from there. But what is that like, you know, when people are just not
Mm.
prospecting enough, you know? Like I remember we get up at like, you work at from 8 and then you work until you don't book, like until you book like 2 meetings. Like what does that look like?
It's a great question, Ryan. You know, I see it twofold, right?
Mhm.
So one fold, I see probably less now than ever really hungry people for commission jobs.
Mhm.
I think the whole commission structure is scary for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I don't really blame them if they're getting into the business now. But I think if you go back to commission structure during COVID, I think everybody would jump on board because there was a ton of money going around,
Yeah.
right? So I think there's ebbs and flows, or for lack of a better term, there's waves that come in, and it comes in waves. Right now, a commission structure income is probably scary for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Right. And I think not just in logistics, I think in any industry, it's probably very scary.
Yeah.
Um, but how do we as companies mitigate that? Right. And I don't know if a lot of companies are evolving in that way, because the process is the process, the structure is the structure, and that's it. Right. They've been successful in it. They've been like, you look at some of the companies been around for 20, 30 years. This has been their process for 20, 30 years. Why would they change it? It works. Right. They've been able to scale to 2, 3, 4, 5 billion. It works.
Yeah.
But I think we as you know, as we continue to evolve, as things continue to settle down. And when I say settle down, right, like, you know, a year ago, AI was going to take over everybody's job. And I
Yeah.
think now people have realized, okay,
It's
it's
not.
not going to, is it eventually going to get to places like most banks are going to be automated and maybe have 1 or 2 tellers instead of 15? Probably. But there's a process to get there, right? You know, a year ago, there was a bunch of people, or 2 years ago, there was a bunch of people saying, you know, self-driving trucks are going to take over for truck drivers. So again, that's quite a while away. But what I am finding in the market is the creator economy is taking off. People
Yes.
are believing that they just post a couple of videos on TikTok and all of a sudden they're TikTok famous and they're going to make millions of dollars. I don't think they realize the real effort that goes into creating content and doing that. I
Mhm.
think people are biting off way more than they can chew, because they're trying to create a personal brand, plus they're trying to sell, plus they're trying to grow this or grow that. And I see today, and maybe you see the same thing, focus is so fractioned. It's
Yeah.
scattered,
Yeah.
right? Where, you know, back when I first started, I remember there was one process. It was pick up the phone. Like, email wasn't even a thing back then. Pick up the
Yeah.
phone and make the calls.
Yeah.
And now I think there's so many different things. You know, this company's coming out with this, and you're able to create an avatar of yourself, and you don't even have to be there. And you know, companies like SendSpark that we use all the time, and it's like, you know, dynamic videos, and you create it once and send it thousands of times.
Yeah.
There's all these tools that I believe help our productivity, but I don't think people use them properly. They use
No.
them instead of working. Whereas if you can use a tool while you're working that does something on the side, you're doubling and tripling your output. And I think that's the piece that people are missing. They're thinking they can use these AI tools, or this new automation with Zapier, or this new that, or this,
Yeah.
and they don't have to work.
Yeah.
And I don't believe in any industry that's the solution, because I just don't
No.
see it. I believe the universe will reward you for what you do. Right. And I know
Exactly.
you and
Yeah.
I have spoken about this many times, but it's like, if I choose not to work, what I put in is what I get out. And
Yeah.
and I don't think any AI, any software, anything's going to do it. I mean, I look at Bridger, great tool for organization, probably the best on the market right now for organization. But if you don't do the work,
You're not
it's
gonna.
not going
Yeah.
to get you anywhere.
It's not gonna get you anywhere. And I think, you know, you bring up a great point. So I think a lot of people are confusing like tech stacks. You know, like I have a tech stack of things that I do. There, I look at them as if I'm gonna make like a nice soup, these are kind of like the seasonings that I kind of add, or like the ingredients and stuff like that.
Ooh, I
But
like
I still
that.
got to kind of bring them all together, right? Like I love Senspark for what it does, right? Some people might not love Senspark. Some people might like the like we use the lavender AI for like email structure. Some people might not like that. And Dan, I think with people and just I want to talk about the content stuff that you're talking about right now, because
Mhm.
we're in Canada right now, so something like TikTok, you can't monetize your TikTok, but I've seen people go viral like in the US, and like it's led to like sponsorships and it's led to everything. And you know what? I talked to a really good friend who was just crushing it in logistics for like a long time, and they're like, you know what? I got kids now who are growing up. I'm missing time with them because cradle to the grave. I just want to do different things. So it's just like I want to become like a sales coach. I want to help people get to this level too. And I'm like, that is perfect. That is exactly the perfect transition. I think there's somebody that I follow pretty religiously. Her name's Courtney Johnson, Dan, and she does like how to really kind of like career hacks and like more focus on LinkedIn content. And she was kind of saying sometimes you got to be delusional. Sometimes you got to be delusional in terms of gaslighting yourself to, hey, should I be talking to the CEO of this like $100 million company? No, no, no. They need to be talking to me and actually making those calls, because you mentioned earlier before, like back in your day, like it was just calls. I remember when I started, and this was only like 8 years ago, we weren't allowed to send emails until we've had that first call. So it
Mm.
was only strictly cold calling. Like I was not allowed to send an email, or you'd get like you'd technically get in trouble because they kind of saw it. And back in those days, they have like it's kind of like the lazy way, right? And
Mm.
more than ever, everybody working remotely, we've seen this for the past couple of years. Emails is such an easier choice. With me banging out calls again, I'm often asking these shipping managers and talking to them, and they're like, you know what? Like no one's really calling anymore. It seems like people are scared. They want to take the easy option. And it says even people are not even like leaving voicemails. And I know some people strategically don't even leave voicemails, but for me, I utilize using voicemails where it's like, hey, it's Ryan. I'm about to send you an email titled blah 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 blah. Would love to get your thoughts, and just leave it
Yep.
at that. It's not like
Or I've
leave a
just
call back
sent you an
number.
email, blah, blah, blah.
Exactly,
Mhm.
from there. So, you know, this is the time, I think, separation time, like you're mentioning. If the people are not necessarily doing the work, and this is not necessarily the like there is guys out there and females out there just crushing it, but if they want that security blanket too, which is perfectly fine. Like the way that I've
Mhm.
understood base plus salary is like your base covers like your bills, and then your commission, like sorry, your base plus commission covers like your savings and like trips and all that fun stuff that you want to do. But I always felt, Dan, like a natural progression of a logistics sales rep should be, okay, start with base salary, build up a book of business, and eventually transition over to an agent. Go to that commission because you've built that already. Like if you've done 6 months of 30K GP, why get 6%? Why not like switch over to an agent with the same company where you're getting 30, 40%, or even
Mhm.
if you're doing cradle to the grave where you get 70 to 80%. So it's interesting, man, because I see. I, there's one thing I always kind of pay attention to, and I think with LinkedIn, you were talking about like attention, and I've kind of been like going into monk mode of like not really going on social media too much, but I'm seeing the lack of people like announcing like new jobs and stuff, in the logistics space. Remember during COVID, like everyone was like director of this, VP of this, I'm starting a new sales role at this, blah blah blah. But like I'm not really seeing that too much now. So it's either people are head down and they're putting in the work. There's a couple of like I don't want to call them influencers because like they're just like people, whatever. But I've seen a couple of them just go ghost on LinkedIn. So I'm just assuming that they're just crushing it in the dark, and they've realized that their attention was taken so much from like fighting people on the internet that don't matter. Right. So
You know, there's some really great points, and I'd be curious to see what I mean, listen, over the last probably month and a half, I've muted more people on my
mm,
feed
yeah,
than I've ever had to ever on socials because it's just garbage. Um, you can read right through it. People talking about 80, 90% close rates. I mean, you're telling me out of 100 people, you close 80 of them? Not happening.
yeah,
And just things where I'm just like, okay, this is a complete waste of my time. I'm ramping up my presence just by adding some thoughtful insights and more video. Like every time I do one of these, I record it from a different angle and I take pieces of it and put it out there. But Ryan, I don't know what it is. I do know things have flipped, right? Like if you think
mhm,
about back during the pandemic, it was actually easier to get a hold of somebody via email because you had no idea if they were in the office,
exactly, yeah,
right? And now that most people are back in the office, depending on what level you work in, because I know a lot of manufacturing companies where certain levels have to be in the office, like, if you're managing the warehouse, you've got to be there.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think people have really started to pay attention to the idea of a work-life balance.
Yes.
And it's interesting. I was just finished a conversation just before you and I got on this live with a gentleman I've known for a decade and a half. And he worked at the largest company in Canada. And he was like, Dan, I never saw my family.
Yeah.
And he goes, and COVID put things in perspective. He goes, so now I'm here taking a pay cut, everything A to Z. He says, but I'm so much happier.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not working 18 hours a day and taking phone calls till 11 o'clock at night and falling into bed, realizing I wasn't able to put my daughter to bed. And I think people's lives have changed. I think people have started to come to grips of saying, okay, well, what do I really need? And how hard do I want to work to get it? And
Exactly.
I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, Ryan. I mean, I guess to each his own.
Yeah.
But I honestly think it's going to lead to people not living up to their full potential.
Yeah.
And I don't mean
Well,
to get,
you look at the opposite of that, because I had a conversation with a good friend yesterday, and he was on the opposite side of that. He was talking about burnout. Burnout is a true thing, right? And
oh,
I think
huge.
you kind of find that balance too, because you know I think a lot of people, their lives have been put in perspective. Like, not to be morbid here, but I'm finding a lot of like younger people are like passing away. It's just like you want to enjoy the time. Like, look, we blinked and like summer's almost done here in Toronto,
I
right? So
know.
you want to maximize. My wife always makes a joke that she works Monday to Friday, and like the weekends are always like rain. It's just like we don't get the time to organize that. But like, you can have that balance, right? And I think with logistics specifically, like you're not always selling. There's other things that you can do. You level up, you do those self-development things. But
Oh, yeah.
like, what is it? It's better to actually make the shot than not make the shot. So
Yeah.
if people are looking for whatever kind of works with them, like you said, like your friend who like took like the pay cut and things like that, but they have a happier life, they get to see their
Yeah.
daughter every single day. And it's just like, that's what's more important. I'm seeing like where a lot of companies are doing a lot of layoffs and things like that. So not a lot of people are like, they're trying to either do a side hustle or they're trying to do different things where they can kind of control their fate a little bit from that end. So no, but
It's
it's
interesting
interesting you
you
say.
say
I love that
that.
you said that. I love that you said that like
Mm.
sales reps are just not putting in, I don't want to say the work, it is what it is, but they're just not hungry, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, which, and again, I'm very biased, right? That this has been my industry my whole life. So I'm very biased when it comes to logistics. I believe it's the greatest industry on the planet. I agree. I believe if you truly dedicate yourself to being a professional and to raising your bar
Hmm.
all the time, I think it's the greatest career profession you can ever be in,
Yeah.
because the sky's truly the limit when it comes
Yeah.
to logistics, right?
I love
Everything is
logistics, man.
shipped, everything is touched to truck. And again, all you out there, they're like, no, my industry's the best. I'm very biased. That's all there
Yeah.
is to it.
Of course, of
But
course. Yeah.
it's yeah, it's an industry that you can make a lot of money, you can live a really good life, but also you can get
Yeah.
very consumed very quick. And you can go down this vortex of it's just, and I mean, I remember when I first started, everything was logistics, everything.
Yeah.
And my friends at the time probably hated talking to me because it's all I talked about. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden you're now associating with people that's all they talk about.
And I
And
think that's
I
where the
found
success
pros and
too,
cons with
Dan.
it. But
Like, I feel like when you and I were like kind of like truly building our, not truly building, but when we were really in the thick of it, we weren't on LinkedIn. Like, I would be honest with you,
no.
I wasn't on LinkedIn until maybe when I went to Wellington like 5 years ago. Like I wasn't on LinkedIn, I wasn't posting, I wasn't checking anything. Like I was just kind of, okay, this is my call list, this is my CRM. I need to kind of go through there. And then I found my success in like talking to people, right?
Yeah.
Rather than, and I get it. There is like for people, like we're doing this for everybody out there. And there is benefits of like collaborating with your quote unquote like competitors, because realistically, like the people you would connect with on LinkedIn is not really shipping managers, like you might have one or two that you're really connected with, but most of them are going to be other carriers or other freight brokers. And yes, there's success in that in collaboration. But if we kind of go back to old school and like look at our prize, and sometimes we just got to look at our why, man, and figure out like what do we want to do, because what is it? It's end of July now. Realistically, you should be really planning for RFP season come September, October. Even when that time comes, you should be planning for the next year, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm interested to see what's going to happen because, looking at some of the numbers Dean presented last week and the week before, and even next week, he told me about some of the numbers we're going to be talking about. And it's very interesting at what's happening. It's very interesting, the curve and the process. And, like even after yesterday's show, I know Drew was saying, there's this huge thing happening in Sudbury. There's tons, like all of a sudden overnight, it was a huge spike in truckloads going from Chicago to Sudbury.
Really?
Yeah, huge. And so I start researching it, and I find they're averaging an extra 700 people per month in Sudbury, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when you divide that by say 4 people per house, it gives you 33 houses or something like that number, and it's approximately 20 truckloads of goods to build a house. So now you start doing that math and it's like, okay, it makes sense. And I think people are moving to more of these rural areas because people are going to start working from home. There was an article in New York Times talking about 40% of commercial rentals are now up for sublease because they're just too big. And you can see it everywhere, especially in the GTA. Everywhere is for sublease, for lease.
Yeah.
Because I think companies now are moving to a remote model.
Yeah.
Like our company, we got people all over Ontario remotely.
Yep.
Right? Like, why do we need an office? We don't need a corporate facility. We can go rent one for the day at $150 instead of paying $15,000 a month rent.
Yeah.
That money could be allocated to growth. Right. And it's so interesting how things are shifting, and it'll be very interesting in the next 24 months how things shift again. Because I think companies are preparing for times like this where they're saying, okay, there's going to be good times, there's going to be bad times. How do we create a bigger runway during the bad times?
Yeah. And I'm thinking like people who've grown too, like I've seen with some companies where like they got so big, so they just trim the fat, and then it's like, okay, now we're not in scarcity mode anymore. We're actually, we can manage this and things like that. And I think, like the job market is pretty scary out there right now anyways, right? Like you go on LinkedIn, you go on like Indeed or whatever, you'll see like over 100 applicants, and you're really kind of shooting like fish in a bucket. I think, for anybody who's out there and they're looking for like that new gig and stuff like that, I think we need to take a page out of what the tech guys are doing, or tech girls, is like they're prospecting the companies that they want to work at instead of like throwing their resume and then kind of like blasting it out from there. You got to find what looks like a fit to you and then go from there. And I think, with logistics, we're in a great space because like, I've been at three companies I've worked with, and we all use LoadLink, we all use DAT, we're all using the same carriers, we're all doing that stuff. So you just kind of find the best place that you are a fit for, like who you get along with the most. Like, I think gone are the days of like, it's just business is business. And, you have to have that likability factor, because what I've kind of seen is like, if you got a really nice person, sales guy, asshole to kind of deal with on the other hand, both of them send a load, who do you think is going to get there? It's just out of preference, like you become friends with people that you work with, and, grab a beer with them, grab a drink with them, and build that relationship, because it gone, like I said, gone are the days of like, this is just business, this is just work, you clock in from 8 to 5. It's more than that. I've seen this more transition to more of a relationship business, which I love.
Yeah, I think it's the best, because that relationship, I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday, and they were asking me, well, what I just mentioned a 5-star customer. And they went, oh, well, what's a 5-star customer? And I said, well, it's a customer that you do 5+ modes with.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, how do you get that? And I'm like, well, you got to change that voice that I just heard, because all I heard when you said that was money, money, money.
Yeah.
It's not about money. It's about trust.
Yeah.
It's about solving the challenges that they have. But more importantly, it's about trusting your other departments, because this is one thing as sales reps we have a really hard time with, is if I give it to my intermodal department and they screw up, I'm going to lose the customer. It's like
scarcity.
That. So when you look at that, Ryan, that's trust from your colleagues, trust from your teammates, trust from your management, trust from your customers, trust from your suppliers. Like, it's all about trust. It's all about building. And you see it as well as I do when things start to get strained. That's where the call outs come from. That's where people start saying things they might not necessarily truly mean, but it's the emotion taking over. And I think now more than ever, we got to pull emotion out of business.
Yeah.
Like, more than ever, it's challenging. It's stressful. I've had many people on the show lately that have talked about, that that rejection, hangover, the rejection whiplash, where people are getting tired of it. But how would you know a good paycheck if you never got a bad one?
That's exactly it. Like how would you enjoy the sun if we never had the rain, or had darkness, right? And I
Oh, there
think,
you go.
you touched on something that I thought was like really impactful there. And I don't think you realize how impactful that was, but it was like, you know, when you have that trust. And I think remote, we talk about remote, like the benefits of remote, but one of the downsides of remote that I've seen is like, I'm in sales. If I send a quote out or something like that, or I send for an update and I don't get that, we're so used to like that instantaneous like response and stuff like that, but we don't understand what else that person has on their plate.
Yeah.
Right. And having that
Mhm.
understanding, like who cares if it's like 5 minutes, like who cares if it goes to 10 to 20 minutes or something like that. It's like, it doesn't mean that you're more important than them. And I think once you kind of see them eye to eye, that eye to eye level. And I think for sales reps too, you talked about like the 5 modes. The way that I kind of see it is like, it's like a wash rag. And you got to squeeze that. You got to squeeze every single drop from that customer and let them know, like parade what the services you offer. Don't just assume that, they wouldn't want to give me, they don't have flatbed business or they don't do LTL business, stuff like that. You don't ask if you don't tell, right? Closed mouths don't get fed. But, you really have to. I think one thing that I was talking to like one of my managers was like, when the downtime kind of go, everyone's like focusing on brand new customers. And he was like, it's really hard to get brand new customers, man. You got to talk to your existing customers. What are they forecasting? What kind of plans are they doing? Do they have any projects coming up? Like, you're going to get more by building with your existing base and then go off of that referral, and then so you don't have to go fishing so often. Right. So
Not only
it's,
that, if you're disqualifying your present clients, they feel that.
yeah.
They
Yeah.
they they sense it. They feel it. I mean, the number one thing clients say is, "I lose faith when I become a number."
Mm,
That's what it is.
yeah.
How do we avoid that? Right? It's all the same thing. I think it all goes back to just the generic baseline sales,
Yeah.
right? People will do business, people they know, like, and trust. That's it.
Yeah.
Build
Simply.
it, develop it, get it, but achieve what you say you're going to do.
Yeah. And if anybody's looking for something like some visuals to watch that, Dan, I was watching Own in Manhattan on Netflix.
Love
Ryan
that show.
Serhant. Yeah, I love Ryan Serhant, right? Ryan Serhant is the GOAT. Anybody who's out there, watch that. You'll see that accountability. And it's not like, you can tell it's not a fake show. It's like not like scripted or anything like that. It's like he's held people on his own team accountable for what they haven't done, and like realizing that money impact as well, and that like team impact. I think, like you said, you people work with people that they like, know, and trust. And you know I think everybody just needs to develop that trait of like being like likable, and I think everybody has that within them. You can learn how to be likable, or just kind of go talk to people. And I think, it's a great time for introverts right now. Everyone talks about introverts. That they're sometimes the best sellers. But it's really looking at that relationship based, right? Like, clear out the noise. Maybe like, even for me, I think I might just take another social media detox and really hammer it down. Like really hammer it down and see if I can add like a couple more customers. I'm not even going to put a revenue or a GP target to it. I just want to have more conversations with people and kind of learn a little bit more about the market, because you and I both know this, like we can't just go based off of, hey, truck rates are this, gas is this week. It really doesn't matter at the end of the day, right? Those are really contracted freight and not really spot freight. So, find out what you like and what you love, right? Like, Dan, like you said, you're getting back into logistics as well. I'm doing the pet food stuff because I genuinely could talk to anybody about that, right? And I have a lot of fun. And why do stuff? Why work with jerks? Work with people that you
Mm.
really want to work with.